John chapter 19. We're drawing to the end of John's gospel here. We've seen all the way through John's gospel that he's been really deliberate in presenting these contrasting themes: light and dark, life and death, Jesus being fully man and fully God. And also we see this presentation of John, of him presenting Jesus as the better Adam, the second Adam, the true human. So if you remember back in John chapter 1 verse 1, John opens his prologue with these words, "In the beginning." And he's tying his story directly to the creation story, which starts with "in the beginning," back in Genesis chapter 1 verse 1. John is deliberately trying to show us that Jesus comes and brings a new creation, and he comes as the new Adam, the second Adam, the better Adam. We see these connection points all the way through John's gospel, but we see it here in his death as well. In John chapter 19, Jesus has been presented to the Jews by Pilate as their king. They protest. They don't want him to be called their king, but Pilate says, "No, he is your king." And he puts this sign above the cross in every local language. So it's really clear that Jesus is the king of the Jews. And John is really deliberate in how he describes the crucifixion. He's really deliberate in the time that it happens, in the people who are there, and in the place that it happened. He describes the place that Jesus is crucified. He describes the place where the cross is placed as the place of the skull. That was its local name. We know it as Calvary, or in Aramaic it's Golgotha, but locally it was called the place of the skull. And it was literally a rock face that looked like a skull if you stood back from it. And the early church fathers extrapolated and maybe went a little bit too far in the significance of the place that Jesus was crucified. Some of them thought that this was the place that Goliath's head was buried. When David slaughtered Goliath, he brought his head into Jerusalem, and they think that maybe it was buried there. Some of the church fathers say that, well, it looks like a skull, it looks like a head, and we know that Jesus came to crush the head of Satan. Maybe that's why it was there. Origen, one of the church fathers, believed that Adam himself was buried there on Calvary Hill in Golgotha. Now, all of these things they could be true, they may not be true, but there are certain points that John deliberately draws out to show us how Jesus is the better Adam, the truer human, the second Adam. As Jesus is hung on a cross, the Romans gather around him, and in verse 23 it says that they take his garments and they divided them into 4 parts, and they took away his tunic as well. This tunic, John says, was seamless, woven in one piece from top to bottom. It had been made for Jesus, specifically for this purpose, maybe by his mother or Mary. Someone close to him has made this special garment for him to wear at his crucifixion. And they cast lots for his garments. They don't tear up the tunic because it's worth some money, but they cast lots. And this is a direct fulfillment of the prophecy written in Psalm 27, which says, "They divided my garments among them, and for my clothing they cast lots." Now, what is John doing in telling us that? Well, think about Adam. Adam sins in the garden. He is naked. He realizes that he is ashamed, and he bears the guilt of his sin. But God in his mercy and love comes and makes a garment for Adam and clothes him to cover his shame. The opposite happens here for Jesus. Jesus is without guilt, and yet he takes on the guilt of you and I if we have faith to believe. He takes on our guilt, and he is stripped naked. His garments are taken off of him, and he hangs naked for all to see. There's also something else profound going on with this garment here. Through the Old Testament, you look at the role of the high priest in the temple. Now, before they came and made atonement for the people's sins on the Day of Atonement, they would take off their garments and then enter into the holy place. Jesus' garment is taken off of him, and he makes atonement for the sins of the people. And as his body is broken and his blood is shed, as he suffers and dies and bears our guilt and our shame and takes the penalty for our sin, he performs the duty of the great high priest. He makes atonement for our sin. And as he dies, the curtain in the temple is torn in two, and you and I have access with him into the holy place, the presence of God. Jesus is the greater Adam, the truer human, the one who is stripped naked and bare to suffer for our shame and our guilt, to make payment for our sin. And he is the great high priest who through his death on a cross makes atonement for our sin and brings us into the presence of God. Would we worship him, the true human, our great and loving and merciful God, our powerful high priest who's made atonement for our sin.